Hi guys and welcome to Whisky Geek for another whisky review. My name's Ben and today I'm looking at Tamnavulin. Now Tamnavulin is a distillery which many of you may not have even heard of, may not have seen around, and I wouldn't blame you. It's been around for a good while, but it's mostly been a workhorse distillery, and what we mean by that is a distillery that produces most of its alcohol, or what it's focused on is producing alcohol for blends. It's owned by White & Mackay, but in 2016 they, as a celebration of their 50th year, their 50th anniversary, they brought out this expression. This is Tamnavulin Double Cask. It's White & Mackay, so it's a no age statement, it's 40%, it's heavily chill filtered, and it's coloured to buggery, of course. But I picked up this bottle for 18 quid. This one I think was 20. This one was 20 and this one was 22, which presents a pretty good value proposition in my book. And so I was intrigued, firstly because it is cheap and, well, I've tried this one before and I have enjoyed the double cask before. So I figured it was worth giving the others a try, and if they are decent I can bring them to you guys, I can share it on the channel, and either I'm saving you from purchasing a potential dud or I'm bringing an interesting value proposition to you. So it seemed like a good idea. Now, as I've got 4 whiskies here to get through, I'm going to try and be quite concise. This one, although synthetically coloured, is a shade 12 Australian Muscat. On the nose, it's initially quite sour, but there's an interesting cacao beans, a little bit bitter, some earthy vanilla pod, honeyed, a touch musty, syrupy, some hazelnuts and caramel, a gentle citrus, kind of tangerines. The sherry is present, but it's taken a real back seat, it's subdued. It's predominantly that kind of sour tone, the bitterness, and there's a soft kind of ginger prickle to it. Moving on to the palate. It's quite gristy, that's the shell of the barley once it's been milled and you get the hard shells come off. It's the tannins, it's a bit dry, sawdusty. There's a young prickliness to it, it's quite evident that it's a younger whiskey, but there's a creamy mouthfeel and some subtle sweetnesses are starting to show, kind of honey, vanilla, a touch of caramel maybe. But it's predominantly those oaky tannins and a bit drying on the palate. The finish is drying, oaky, more of those tannins, a warmth, a subtle sweetness again, and it's quite short. So I've rated this whiskey as 68%. I've had much better, but I've also had way worse, and at £18 I can't really fault it. Most of what I've drunk this whiskey doing is sharing it with friends and family. Throughout the Christmas period, throughout New Year's, this has been appreciated by a bunch of people, and it always seems to hit home with people who don't necessarily like whiskey. It's not a whiskey drinker's whiskey because it doesn't benefit from being analysed or spent time on. It's a casual drinker's whiskey, but it tends to help open people to the world of whiskey, and they go, actually that's quite interesting, what else have you got? And it's a good segue into whiskies which I would consider to be really good whiskies. So this was a workhorse distillery and they've started to bring single malts to the market, and part of what's allowed them to do that is their re-racking policy. It's something that White & Mackay also did with Jura, and it's led to all of those weird and wonderful expressions, the winter editions, the rum cask, the red wine cask, all sorts, 7 wood. What they've done here is essentially take their workhorse spirit in old tired bourbon, generally quite uninteresting, and it falls down really hard when you start to chill filter it and start to colour it, and they've put it into casks which can start to bolster the spirit, give it points of interest, give it more merit. So the different finishes and the sherry casks that they choose to use are what make these whiskies worth drinking. So the idea of this expression, the sherry cask edition, it's matured in American oak barrels and then finessed by 3 different types of sherry cask. This double cask also has some sherry influence, but this one is finished in 3 different types of sherry and then brought back together, vatted together. Again, it's been presented at 40%, chill filtered and coloured, but I've got it down as a shade 11 Old Sauternes. The nose is giving me more biscuits, ginger nut biscuits, that honeycomb brittle and some butterscotch. Oaty malt and dried orange peel, the sherry influence feels more genuine. thins out to a light prickle, some raisins, a kind of that damp cardboard feel. It kind of reminds me of like a hot toddy. It's thin, watered down alcohol with some lemon, some honey onto the palate. It's quite thin, biscuity, oaty, warming. A sweetness is beginning to develop and some baking spices. I feel it's quite evident that it's tired wood, not a great deal of, if any, first fill sherry casks. There's a touch of apricots, and underpinning it all is that sourness again. The finish is quite subtle and fleeting almost, with more of the lingering warmth, a touch of the dry oaky tannins, a hint of bitterness comes with that, and a light citrus, but again, it's short. So I've rated this one as 73%. It's a marked improvement from the double cask in my opinion. It's fuller, the nose, the palate has got more niceties to it, but it's struggling in the same ways. I think the Tamnavulin spirit characteristic part of it is that sourness. It's similar to what the master distiller from Dalmore, another White Mackay distillery, calls baby sick. It's that sour tone which I don't necessarily like. I don't think is good for the whiskey or a nice characteristic to carry through. But when it's smothered with other sherry influence or red wine influence and it takes a back seat, it's acceptable, it's okay. So again, £20, this is pretty good. It's a decent value proposition, but it's one that goes down well sharing with people rather than one to sit and enjoy on your own. I think it's a background whiskey or a social occasion whiskey. Now we move on to these red wine cask editions. I like red wine finished whiskey. I don't really like red wine, but I like what it does to a whiskey. So these were kind of interesting and exciting, and these are what got me interested in Tamnavolin again. I wanted to give them a try. So this specific one, I believe most of them are, they're controlled in batches, they're given a number. This one is number 1, which is French Cabernet Sauvignon cask finish. There are 3 that I'm aware of. I only have 2 of them because one of them isn't easily or readily available in the UK. I think some of them are used as travel exclusives, that kind of thing. So the distribution of them is a little weird. I think I have number 1 and number 3. But this is batch 1243. So I think because the wine industry is more healthy than the sherry industry, it's likely that the casks used here are closer to first fill than the sherry, which means that the colouring is much more natural. There's less of a deficit that they have to fill in with caramel colouring, and I think it comes across on the nose and the palate. But I've got it down as a shade 12 Australian Muscat. So the nose is very welcoming, friendly, rounded. There's lemon fondant and baked pastries, some kind of hint of almond, and again citrus, tangerine in there. Cocoa powder, nutmeg, some soft stone fruits like plums. There is a subtle vinous sourness, maybe, almost a vinegary touch, a vinegary astringency, but it's proper, it's subtle, it's in the background, and you've got to go kind of digging to really find it. It's very friendly, it doesn't come out to you at all. On the palate, again, we've got soft fruits, we've got apricots, those ripe plums, touch of vanilla, some oakiness, tiny bit sour, again restrained in the background, and it's a little drying with a kind of biscuity cerealness to it. So that finish tapers off quite quickly. It's a touch vinous, there's some tannins in there, the soft fruits are still trying to hang on, still trying to show themselves, but they're suffering a little bit. There's a touch of the spice, but altogether it's too short. So I've rated this one as 72%. It's just behind the sherry cask edition. It does well, the red wine influences are doing well to bolster the spirit and to fill in some of the blanks as it much needed, but the sherry cask edition is just slightly richer. This is more restrained, more friendly, more easy. The sherry cask edition is a little more exciting, but they're about on par. If you're in a pinch, 20 quid, this is a decent one to go for, but again, it doesn't really stand up to scrutiny. So we kind of have a recurring theme here as we go into the fourth expression. We have a unexciting, sour, baby sick spirit, which is presented kind of limply, which is leaning extremely heavily on interesting wood finishes or sherry finishes or wine finishes to make it worth a look, make it worth your money. And this, the red wine cask edition German Pinot Noir, which is number 3, is the one that does the best job of that in my opinion. This is batch 164. I've got it down as a shade 11 Old Sauternes. Let's see what that nose has to offer. So straight away it comes across with this quite rich nuttiness to me. It's almost walnuts and a nice warmth, spiced nutmeggy warmth. Behind that there's a malt vinegary tone, but I should mention that when I drink red wine I find the prominent feature of all red wine to be a malt vinegary-esqueness, so if you're familiar with and you enjoy red wines you probably won't pick it up on this at all. Some poached pears, clotted cream, cocoa powder and roast coffee beans, and I think only because I'm going looking for it that Tamnavulin sourness is there. But if I wasn't coming off the back of these and looking specifically for that in the DNA, probably wouldn't pick it up. It's kind of secondary to that vinegariness to me. The palate starts quite rich but then takes a flat turn. The sourness is more evident than it was on the nose. Cranberry sauce, some honeycomb. The malt vinegary tone is still there to me, but the red wine tannins are more prominent. Not in a cloying way though, they're more evident but not in a negative way for me. That finish, it picks up again for me, it becomes richer. The red wine tannins are really carrying it through nicely, and it's longer than any of those expressions were. I've got hints of the vinegar again, spices, touch of ginger, some clove. There's a citrusy fruitiness trying to push in. It's a little drying, a little bitter, and some casky oak in there as well, but not as young feeling as some of the other expressions were. So I've rated this one a 78%. It's the most bang for your buck out of any of these expressions, and I'd say if you can find it for 20-22 quid, it's worth it. I enjoy it the most out of these, and it stands up on its own merits better than any of the others, you know, without the caveat of, oh, it was only 20 quid. It's red wine driven, sure, but it's more the tannin side of things and the intricacies and the interest around that than it is a kind of a fruity red wine. So there's stuff to explore, and it's got some interest more so than the others, and I don't at any point find that the Tamnavolin sourness is causing me a problem or it's becoming too evident. So this German Pinot Noir expression is the one to go for in my opinion. That being said, I'm looking forward to killing off all these bottles so that I can replace them with something more interesting on the shelves. So cheers for watching guys, hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.